Hello, darkness, my old friend. I see you coming round again.
There is a line in a song that is so genius that I listened to for so many years and I never understood.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you know the band Bare Naked Ladies. They had that song One Week where they
Yeah.
sang really quickly.
Yeah.
They have a song called If I Had $1,000,000.
Yeah.
And they talk about all the things they'd buy if they had $1,000,000. And there's a line in it that says, if I had $1,000,000, I would buy you some art. And then the guy comes, he goes, yeah, like a Picasso or a Garfunkel. I'm like, I never understood the line. He says, I'm going to buy you Art Garfunkel from Simon and Garfunkel.
I like it.
I'm going to buy you art like a Garfunkel. You're going to take Art Garfunkel as your slave. Anyway,
Brilliant.
yeah. Anyone under the age of 30 has no idea what I'm talking about, and we'll move on.
Great look up though for Spotify playlist is a bare naked ladies track.
I think that album might have, no, it was the second album I ever bought behind Sheryl Crow's Tuesday Night Music Club.
Okay, and then throw in the mix some Hootie and the Blowfish.
Let her shine.
Team, we are at our final episode of season 2 of Dead Elephants, and what we want to do is kind of wrap up all loose ends for this season.
This is the airing of grievances of all the things that we're not happy with.
Yeah, darn it. Listen to the AI stuff. It's good.
We're going to do another episode next season.
I will keep doing it.
Please, world, would you please listen to it so I don't have to humor Duncan with another AI episode, for the love of all things.
We got a whole bunch of things that we want to summarize. What's on our horizon? Want to talk about your book. Want to talk about an organization that you're forming. I want to talk about media. I want to talk about church planning. I want to talk about our GoFundMe page, which I've done a terrible job of explaining and setting up. Let's do all of that this episode and put a bow around the season and say we're looking forward to season 3.
All right. Well, so that's my first question. We're implying here that season 2 is over, but
There's going to be a third season.
there you go.
So one of the things that I think Chris and I have both been trying to do is figure out how to do this well and sustainably. So
Yeah. So just want to go into the sustainable. Well, I'll go into it. And look, this podcast is not about us. It's not a whatever. We do this because we're passionate about it. It takes a fair bit of time in preparation, at least for me, who does prepare. It takes a fair bit of time in editing. Sorry.
which I edit.
That's true. Look, this is a passion project, right? We don't get paid for it. It takes our time, but we love it, right? So we're not asking for your sympathy, but we're just needing to keep working out. We've got lives outside of this podcast. We've got kids. We've got jobs. How do we do this in a way that we want to keep producing stuff, and we will keep producing stuff, but we need to keep refining how we do it in a way that we also honor the other commitments in our life.
Yes. As much as I joke that Chris is no longer employed and fully retired, it's not true. He actually has a whole bunch of other endeavors. I'm lead pastor at a church.
Yep.
I'm working in a startup. I'm coaching jiu-jitsu. And so for us to line up our schedules and do this takes a whole bunch of effort, which we love to do.
Yes.
And I think from my perspective, I think that there's a place for Australian theological voices. I think there's a place where we can continue to talk about these kind of deep, challenging, taboo topics well. And so I've always been very passionate with Chris kind of behind the scenes of saying, let's keep doing this, but let's figure out a way that we can sustainably do that.
So what do you think that looks like then? And I'm asking this in real time because this is something that you and I are working out now.
Yeah, I think developing up a good set of questions. I think what we've learned is getting multiple guests in a room together can be very, very challenging, as opposed to when we just have one guest in a room. And so figuring out a way to do that well. All the technology that we use right now is my technology. So if you watch the video of us talking to the mums, that's at my church.
Yep.
I had to transport all the technology over there. Took me a bunch of time to set up. When we were talking with our lovebirds in the dating game, that was in my house. I had to move everything in there. It just gets really challenging. Yeah. I think our way of moving forward, we saw it in the collaboration podcast, is that we discovered a new technology platform, Riverside, that I think will help us out a lot. Limiting our guests to one or a couple who are going to be in the room at the same time, so we only have to coordinate that with one person, is really good.
Yep.
And then part of the reason why we have the GoFundMe page is the video quality hasn't been as good as the audio quality. And so how do we improve that?
Yeah. While you've mentioned it, do you want to second the GoFundMe stuff now you've brought it up?
Yeah, listen, I honestly don't fundraise particularly well. One of the things I've wanted to do is add 2 Blackmagic cameras to our studio setup.
Blackmagic is a brand, by the way. We're not going to the darkness.
Yeah, they're an Australian brand. It includes switches and lenses. It costs $10,000. I've probably set up, and you can't really see it unless you can't even see it on the video, but you know, I've spent roughly about $50,000 of my own money building this podcasting studio for when I was in radio, and I do it for podcasting and some other stuff as well. But it was always designed to be an audio first space.
Sure.
And what we're learning is that if we want to grow this thing and incorporate some advertising funding, which is included in that GoFundMe page, we have to have good, excellent videos. And we don't right now have the equipment to do that. And so we're just asking you as a listener, if you jump on board and you do have the capacity to give some money towards it, I've got a breakdown of everything we would spend it on, but primarily it's to have an advertising budget so we can take this to a global market and to improve the video so what we are recording looks really excellent because it already sounds really excellent.
Sure. And so it's just to be crystal clear, it's not going into our hip pockets. It's not a salary.
No.
We're still not getting paid for this. It's still a passion that we do.
We have lost money on this endeavor right from the outset.
But we love it.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. The other thing you wanted to talk about is just upcoming stuff in each of our lives. So I guess, taking the platform to make a shameless plug for a few things.
Yeah, go for it. Why don't you talk to me about your book?
Sure. The book's coming out probably the first quarter of next year. I was hoping it would be the end of this year, but there's kind of every publisher's looking at their pipeline and how do we stagger releases and that kind of stuff. So I mentioned last episode and a few episodes previously, it's about love. What does it mean to live with love? Publisher doesn't know this yet, but that's my working title at the moment is Live with Love.
Yep.
But that's always the last thing people often ask, what's the name of the book? And it's like, well, actually, that's the last thing that gets worked out with the publisher. So that's my working title. But look, the conviction, there's a few things that's driving it. I think number one, it's really easy as Christians to lose the forest amongst the trees. Mm-hmm. And I want to just come back and remind people of our first principles that love is what all the law and the prophets, in Jesus' words, hang on.
Yeah.
And so therefore the question becomes, well, what is it? What does Jesus mean by love? How does that interact with how our culture uses the word love? Mm-hmm. And then, as the title suggests, how do we live that out? So I just want Christians to continue to feel on purpose for God.
Yeah.
And I think the way that we live on purpose for God is to be committed to the way of love.
So I think one of the strengths with your first book was it was really real and open.
Right.
You bared your soul about a challenge that unfolded in your life and hit this low point. And I think that's one of the great strengths of the book. What is the soul-bearing premise of this book for you that makes it so important?
Yeah, it's a great question because it is different in that way. Like, the first one was really theology through the lens of a biography of my story, whereas this is more conceptual and this is what I think about the world.
Okay.
And that has made it harder to write, to be honest. It's like, how do you write conceptually but also make it real for people? So there is not as much of me and what I've been through in this inevitably because the first one was different. There is a lot of, hopefully, I think, my reflections, and I really want it to be as readable and as accessible as the first one. So that's still the case. I think the burden that I put into the book of what I'm feeling is we're just living more and more in a polarized world.
Yep.
Everyone's yelling at each other louder. We're factional, all this we're tribal. And I just I feel the burden. And really, that's what this podcast is, to be able to say, as we've said from episode 1, how do you disagree well? And I think love is a key part of that. I want Christians to find a third way that says neither yes nor no straight away, but how.
Yeah.
And I think love is the transferable mindset and heart disposition that is as applicable from the biggest things in life right down to the smallest. And there are stories in there about how I've seen love play out in the most stupid examples, like exploding bin juices in a church kitchen where someone didn't take out the rubbish in time, right up to how you think about politics, family, work. That's the point of the book, that love actually sweeps over everything in life. It is, in my opinion, Jesus' thesis statement to life itself, that all of the law and the prophets hang on the two great commands to love God and love your neighbor. And therefore, for each of us, each and every day, asking ourselves the question, am I living with love, is precisely the right question to be asking with intentionality.
Love it. Awesome.
Do you? Love it. I get it.
I do.
Yeah.
I do. I had a buddy in the States who runs an organization called the Live Love Foundation.
Okay.
And so, Paulie G, shout out to you.
What does the Live Love Foundation do?
So it's based on 1 John 4, to live a life of love.
This is love, not that we love God, but that God loved us. Yep.
And so he has created in a fairly poor area of Phoenix, Arizona, a Live Love community, which basically the way US works is if you are a poor area, then you don't get much tax money that you can then invest into your community. And so your community gets poorer because the schools lack funding. The roads lack like just all your
I couldn't believe it when I learned that, by the way. That's crazy.
And so he just said, well, we're going to, as a community, this is the Grove Church in Phoenix, Arizona. He's the missions pastor there. He raised a whole bunch of money for this Live Love Foundation that he set up to transform a really broken, poor area in Phoenix and create a space where it was excellent and where what was going on there was transformative, and they were living the love of Jesus in their community. And I just love his heartbeat for it. It has kind of a monastic vibe to it, which is really beautiful, and he's doing really good stuff, and it looks really tremendous. When you drive down what looks like a very poor area, you come around the corner and you see the Live Love community, and you're like, whoa.
And that what I love about that is it starts with a mindset of love, and it then looks like something after that. But so often we get caught up with the what am I going to do rather than asking how am I going to do it. But asking the how question first really drives a best practice of what we do after that.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
You got anything like that on the pipeline? You've talked about a book that you might be working on.
So Chris and I have very different approaches to book writing.
Yeah, one of them's right and one of them's wrong.
That's not true. Mine's right as well. So I'm working on a book called Real-Time Grace at the Speed of Jesus, and it looks at the nature of the 5 different graces that we see. And my premise is that as a church, we need to learn to use real-time grace. We're very good at using retroactive grace. We can read scripture and go, oh yeah, David is a good king of Israel. But if we were in that moment, he wouldn't be on our eldership team at certain points of his reign. What does it look like to live real-time grace at the speed of Jesus?
Why do you could have written about anything. What's the burden behind this for you?
I remember being in my early years of university, disappointed that I didn't get selected to be on a leadership team within a church. And I remember the youth pastor saying to me, Duncan, you're a black sheep, and I just don't know how to use you. And it's a fair assessment. I don't harbor ill will now about it, but his notion was you don't comfortably fit the mold of what we're trying to do here, and therefore I don't see any value in that.
Really hard to cop.
Yeah, as a 18, 19-year-old, just a brutal thing to hear. And at that time too, like I had I'm never going to pronounce it right. Subcutaneous cystic acne, and I was on Roaccutane, and so I was just in a really dark season where I felt like I wasn't being chosen by God for anything. Whereas the truth of the matter is, in Jesus, your chosenness is assured. And so there was an assuredness of faith that I didn't quite grasp a hold of. I've always been a pastor who wants to go and find the one
Yep.
rather than tend to the 99. And so I've always found my ministry better around the fringes than at the center. And I just didn't feel connected in any way, shape, or form. I eventually found a youth group where I could invest and was valued and felt chosen, and that was a real blessing for my faith and my development. But it's been the way that I lead our church, is that it's a place for seekers to come and sit at the feet of Jesus and figure out where they are, how far along on the journey they are, and there's no pressure in them knowing the rules or understanding the destination, except that destination being Jesus. And we want you to fall in love with that.
To the point of the name, they need real-time grace.
Real-time grace. So it's okay to not have the answers. It's okay to ask questions that are offensive. They may be offensive, but it's probably because you need to know the answer to it. And we want to honor that and allow space where that can be cultivated.
So you're encouraging messy environments because, and coming back to the story of when you were young, you felt like you were too messy to be accepted yourself, and you felt the pain of that, and you don't want to do that for other people.
Yeah, and I also want you to have permission. So we try and lead our church so it's a live environment. You can interact, you can respond, you can ask questions. Our community is learning to do that more, but it makes it really difficult for a guest speaker to come in here who are used to a sterilized environment.
Yep.
Be quiet and listen.
Yep.
I can't have that. I want your baby crying in the back. I want you to walk in late. I want you to go and get a coffee because you need a coffee. I want you to stick your hand up and ask a question. I want you to, when I say something stupid, you have permission to lovingly make fun of me.
Yep.
It feels like a stand-up comedy venue purposefully.
Yep.
Because our faith should be a wrestle. And I don't have all the answers. And so let's wrestle that out together.
Yep.
That's all the nature of what it is. I don't have a publisher. I'm not very good with publishing houses who tell me I'm not a very good writer. I often tell them to go stick their head up their rear end. But if you have a creative publishing house and you want to jump on board with it,
you're going to need a publisher that has real-time grace.
Yeah, well, I think there's a market for it.
Yeah.
And my other books sold well, so I know that when we get to a finished product, it's good and it'll go. But I don't have bandwidth for an individual who comes back and says you're not a very good writer.
Sure.
I have stuff that I think is valuable and worth saying.
All right, keep going.
So, yeah, that's and then just pastoring a church that we're hoping to continue to grow.
Love it.
Yeah,
love it. Hey, I've got one more thing on the horizon that I might just take a couple of minutes to talk
go
about.
for it.
Yeah, like it's hard to know where to start, and I won't bore you with the full story. But coming out of a very generous small church based here on the Northern Beaches came a significant financial grant to start a new ministry that I'm really excited about. It's called Life to the Full.
Yep.
Its tagline is Holistic Christian Flourishing. And in many ways, it's come out of some of the conversations of this podcast. So we're going to do three things. We're going to keep creating content like we are with this podcast, but in a few other ways. And the desire is to keep hearing people's stories, keep getting really real about faith and how Christ has impacted you. So content, itinerant speakers, podcasts, all that kind of stuff. And we got some names who I won't release yet because things are still getting signed on, but we got some pretty cool people on board. The second thing we're going to do actually though is to run a Christian-oriented private practice. So clinical psychologists and relationship counselors, things like that. You don't have to be a Christian to access our services. And if you're not, our clinicians will respect those boundaries for sure. So it's welcome for all people. But if you are a Christian and you've wanted to get good mental health or relational health or even spiritual health counseling, and you want to know where the Christians are at, ours is hopefully the place that you can come to. You don't have to be based in Sydney. We're also going to do telehealth nationwide, and our government's put a lot of money into that too. So that's pretty awesome. So keep your eyes peeled for that. And then the last thing we're going to do is build out some retreats, which we've spoken about before on this podcast too. So content, clinic retreats, Life to the Full. It's coming in the next few months publicly, and it's my pleasure and privilege to be able to head that up, and a great team that are coming on board. And I don't say this lightly in any way, shape or form. It does feel like there's a movement of the Spirit in this, and God is building something here that I'm really excited about. And I just want to lean into that with integrity and do it for His glory and not my own.
You got a sex therapist, Dante?
We may just.
Okay, good. Because we've talked about that.
I'll let you join the dots of who that might be.
Okay, awesome. That sounds really exciting.
Yeah.
Oh, I did mention. I mentioned it last episode. I'm also working on a startup for AI, Crisis AI robot. You can just check that out. ineedanswersnow.com.
So that link is live for people?
Yeah, it's still in alpha. So we're still basically training the AI bot. It's designed for a North American audience. And that's really important, is that in Australia, there's a responsibility to inform appropriate people on certain matters related to self-harm.
Yep.
Because this is a North American AI robot, it doesn't necessarily have that same kind of functionality built into it. But eventually, in later iterations, we're going to look to do an Australian-based version.
Man, I just want to honor you and just say, I've known you for a long time. We've spoken off air about wrestling with identity around, what am I doing with my life and all that kind of stuff. But I respect you so much that you're a man of conviction, and you are manifesting those convictions in a way that is trying to bring glory to God. So keep going.
Unfortunately, those convictions bite me in the butt when I get an editor telling me I'm not a good writer.
You really need to let this one go.
I'll learn. I'll work through it.
So we're done. Season 2, baby.
Yep. Again, if you want to get involved and support the podcast by helping us advertise a bit better for season 3, for getting some video equipment that will help us out a bunch, GoFundMe page. Discord channel stays active.
Yep.
In the off season. It's actually really good for us to develop new content. We love it when you share questions, because that helps us frame up season 3. We feel like if there's certain topics that you would like more on, that's the place to let us know how to do it. And there's also a link for the GoFundMe page on the Discord channel.
Okay.
That's the best way. There's an email address, isn't there?
Yeah.
What's our email address?
mail@deadelephantspodcast.com.
You can email us directly. I'm hoping we get a chance to do another live podcast in season 3. So if you're interested, if you're a church and you're interested in doing that, and we can tee that up with the launch of Chris's book, we would 100% love to do a live podcast at your church if you're willing to do it.
Okay.
Serve alcohol, because I like a red wine.
And be somewhere else in the country that can fly us first class.
All right. We'll see you again next season.
Next season, not next week. Woo! Next season.
Keep us up to date in the comments.
Do we need like a muscle watch for you in the off season? Are you going to come back with like shredded biceps like they do in the NBA?
I can't have a fat coach at a combat
All
gym.
right. Muscle watch is on. Season 3.
See ya.
See you later.